Hello and welcome to today's episode of Conquer the Day. I am your host, Lindsay Pickowitz.
And I am your co-host, Brian Pickowitz.
Today we have one of our dearest friends with us, Sarah Ahmad, who is joining us. You can see her if you are on YouTube. You'll hear her soon if you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. She is joining us and hailing all the way from the great country of Texas today. And we had to get one podcast in with her before she headed back. Sarah, as you'll learn, is a very, very busy individual. She wears so many different hats, and we wanted to bring her on because not only does she have extensive history and experience with personal training and helping people get healthy, but she also is such a great living example of someone who values health and who's able to successfully transfer that value to her family. And for us as the owners of the Fitness Project, we see so many parents come in who are getting healthy either for the first time or for the first time in a long time. Now they have little kids or tweens, maybe teens, and they really want to do everything they can to transfer those values of health and well-being, healthy eating, exercise to their kids. But a lot of times they aren't really sure how to go about doing that. This episode, we figured the best person to talk about this would be Sarah, because she has 4 little ones. I will let her elaborate on her story, but she's such a great example of health for her kids. And she also has learned the do's and don'ts, trial and error. And so the goal of this episode is just to give you a living and breathing example of somebody who's done this well that you can learn from. She will never say that she is like the golden standard and she's done everything perfectly. She'll never say that, but she will be able to give her experience so that you can learn maybe some different ways that you could approach teaching your children, some of the principles that you're learning yourself and that you'd really like to transfer to them. A long-winded intro, but Sarah,
yes.
Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show again.
Yes, it's so good to be here.
Physically here.
Actually here.
Well, and one of the things we were talking about beforehand is just, remember last night we were kind of talking about what we were going to address or teach people today, but it's also understanding that the things that you've learned how to do are not just, I learned them yesterday. They've been years and now decades with each and every kid. If you were to walk back to maybe like where you started though as like a new-time mom, what was kind of that experience like with how busy you were trying to navigate that season of life and also take care of yourself?
Yeah. So, I've been involved in fitness since, 13 is when I started working at a gym. 22 was when I started working as a personal trainer, and I loved working out. So the idea of giving up working out when I had kids was like never on the table. But when my first one was born, things did get busy and I was tired. And I realized quickly that just 10 minutes of cardio made me feel better. I would get kind of emotional maybe around like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, just from the stress of like all the new things about becoming a mom. And a lot of times I would start to cry. And I realized if I just got on my little stair stepper, is what I had at the time, for 10 minutes, I felt better. And so I realized quickly for my mental health, I couldn't give up working out. I had to make sure I made time for it, even if it was 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And so I did that with every kid that I have. And I think last time we talked, we did prenatal, postnatal. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I work with postnatal clients. And that's a big part of when you've had a baby, is remembering like it's less about your fitness and getting your body back at that point, but it's really about self-care and feeling better. So it might look a little different during that season, but it's so essential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you're bringing it to today so that people have a landscape and context, what is a week in the life look like of Sarah? I already alluded to the fact that you have 4 children, yes. But what is kind of the dynamic so that people can have a grasp on maybe how your story will relate to them as we talk?
Sure. Okay. So my little one is 3, and then I have a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 15-year-old. So I do a lot of driving. I kind of feel like an Uber driver right now, driving them to school, driving them to activities.
Do they tip well?
I'm in the car. They don't.
They try to control the music.
They sometimes try to kill each other in the back seat. And it's a lot of like, stop, I need to focus on driving. So, that's a lot of my life right now. I work about 10 hours a week as a personal trainer when all the kids are in school. My husband also works as like a trainer of athletes. And so I tend to work in the mornings. He tends to work in the late mornings to later in the day. So we trade off being responsible for everything else when the other one's not working. Um, Other than that, managing their schedules is kind of like a full-time job, it feels like. Cooking, cleaning, man, like laundry. I feel
And
like
they're all in activities.
they
right?
are.
Well, other than Kaya.
They
the
are. My
youngest.
daughter dances and she dances in dance company. So that's 10 hours a week of dancing in classes, plus competitions on the weekends. My son plays basketball. My daughter, my 9-year-old, plays volleyball and she just started play practice. She's going to be in a musical.
Oh,
And the little one goes to preschool. I don't have room for her to have an activity right now,
That's
but
all right.
eventually she will. So, yeah, I just feel like sometimes at the end of the day, I feel very much like I'm not really sure what I did today, but it's a lot of just running everyone to everything. And somehow in there, I get my workouts and I'm still fitness racing a little bit and prioritizing that. So,
Is it this is a little bit more sideways than we were kind of going with originally, but
sure.
How do you manage on a productive day where you've done your training for the clients, you've made sure the kids survive? How do you balance out not feeling like, oh, I could have done more? Like you have one of those busy days where you're like, oh, well, technically I did do everything, but I didn't feel like I moved a needle forward. But there's a lot of things that went well.
Yeah.
How do you balance that out mentally?
I think that I recently had to come to a realization that like this is going to be a less productive season of life and being okay with that. So just making peace with, I'm not going to be involved in as many things at church possibly, or I'm not going to be involved in as many volunteer opportunities at my kids' schools. I'm kind of maxed out and tapped out and I have to leave room for me to be okay and get what I need and be able to spend time with my friends and feel refreshed. And so I think I just had to like give myself permission to have this season be less productive in those areas. And yeah, I think I'm kind of there now rather than feeling guilty about like realizing that I wasn't doing as much.
Did you ever have a season? Because, okay, Kaya's 3 and Sierra's 15?
Yes.
Did you ever have a season in that time span where you stopped taking care of yourself? Or like that mindset kind of like fell away a little bit, or guilt took over, or like it just, the priority shifted once again?
No, actually, looking back, I've always been pretty good at making sure I get what I need for me. And I don't know where that came from. Like looking back at my parents and their life, like I'm not sure why that's always been like a non-negotiable for me. Like fitness is a non-negotiable, brushing my teeth is a non-negotiable. Like it just goes in that category of I think I deserve that. I know I need it. So
yeah.
What it sounds like is you've built a positive association with it.
Yeah.
So it's
not
so
strong.
So
it doesn't
makes
feel
it easier
selfish.
to feel like you want to do it. There's a clear reward to it that's not just changing your body. Like a lot of people, it's like if the reward is just to lose weight to change your body, then sometimes that feels like a defeat, even when it is a win, right? Because the scale didn't give me the feedback, or I'm still far away from my goal, and that feels really emotionally challenging. Especially you talk about women post pregnancy, right? Getting like the fear that they're not going to have their body back,
Sure.
or the fear that they have to have their body back. Like those two things, I can imagine it's really challenging to want to get in shape or want to take care of yourself. I think it's different when it is so negative, or it's negatively reinforced, versus what you're kind of describing as it's just fundamentally something you've enjoyed.
Yeah. And I would say too, some of my family members struggle with anxiety. And I never really saw myself as an anxious person, but once I had kids, I realized that some of the stress I was feeling was kind of in the realm of anxiety, and exercise fixes that for me. Like when I exercise, I get like clarity on the other side where like life feels more manageable. So I guess it's almost like a drug that I use, but like a very healthy drug.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I know that there was a season before kids where was bodybuilding before kids?
It was before kids.
Okay, so I think that if we're kind of tracking the translation between I'm doing this to change my body and Sarah today, and you're describing a lot of themes around doing it for your mental health, which really means doing it for mental clarity, doing it for joy, making it a non-negotiable because of those rewards, of course, on top of being healthy or longevity. How did your mindset change between those periods? Because I think that what I see a lot of our clients experience is that they start for one reason and then they continue for a completely different one.
Yeah. So I started bodybuilding very much because I wanted a physique that I could be proud of and feel good about. And I felt awful training that way. I looked great and felt awful. And I even had people say to me, like, I'm scared for you. Like, you seem so tired. You seem so worn out. I remember a day that I sat at home and just stared at the wall, just no energy to like other people were out doing fun things. I couldn't even socialize. I felt so terrible. And I kind of thought to myself, one, I don't ever want to feel this way again. And two, like, how could I ever like raise kids feeling this way? And like, I would never want them to live this way. And so I had to go through some hard mental work of refiguring out like what I thought about my body, what I was okay with. I stopped dieting altogether and dove into intuitive eating. And for a whole year, I probably put on 20 pounds. And I practiced learning to listen to my body again and being able to trust it because it was very important to me to be able to model that for my kids. And it was something I didn't know how to do. So I learned that around 22, 23, I think is when it was. And about after a year, my body just kind of reset and I started dropping weight and just finding a new normal. And I did even compete a couple more times after that, but realized it was such a all-consuming thing to do. That felt for me too selfish if I was going to have kids. The way it was all of my energy, all of my day, the strange things I had to eat. I was like, I want my kid's mom one day to be normal and like healthy, but normal. And it took me a long time to figure out what that looked like. And a lot of people look at me now and think that's not normal, but it is way more normal than I used to be.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It is healthy. It is normal, especially if you compare it over to diet culture in general, where it is very restrict, overeat, and even that relationship with food, I think we unintentionally transfer. But what I think is great about what you just shared is that you took just a moment to recognize and decipher whether or not your behavior was one you wanted to see reflected in your kids.
Yes.
Before you had them. I think that a lot of people will hit the stage where they start to see their kids taking on their behavior that's unhealthy and go, oh no, okay, I need to not necessarily reverse the clock, but I need to take this seriously now. I need to see this change in them. Or they want to be more involved because maybe they weren't in the first few years, so they're starting to feel themselves burn out. So when you recognize that it needed to be different, it sounds like you started with your relationship with food or your approach to food. Once you had your first, when did you like reconnect those dots of, okay, and now I'm transferring these skills, or how did you start approaching the process of setting the healthy example or teaching Sierra some of those things? Like, when did that reconnect? It's like, oh yeah, I'm doing this now.
Yeah. So when kids are little, you control everything they eat to some extent, like whether you're nursing or you're starting to introduce foods. Kids typically, when they're very young, just are very good at intuitive eating naturally. And we screw that up eventually, usually. And so it was very important to me to try to not mess with my kids' ability to stay normal and have like a connection to like trusting their bodies and listening to their bodies with food. And so that was a high priority. When my kids were young and like starting to be able to get their own food, because for a long time you're feeding them, you're making their plates, you're putting it in front of them. And so like early on, I think portion is important. to know kind of like expectation wise what variety of foods kids need. I think most people know little kids need real food. You're not usually giving kids Snickers as their first food.
Right.
Parents, a lot of times with their first kids, are hyper careful. I know a lot of people with their first kid that don't even give them sugar at all, don't let them have ice cream. Their Sierra's first cake was like a sugar-free vegan cake, which is really funny to me now because that's like a weird choice and disgusting, I think.
Very specific.
But that's what I did because like it feels so important, I think, to most parents when they're little. But as they get older, it gets way harder because they can grab their own food. And depending on what you have in the house and what they can reach, they're going to start making choices based on that. So I was very intentional in I had kids Cliff Bars was one of the choices that I felt like was healthy-ish for them that they could grab on their own. Fruits and vegetables I tried to always have available for them. And my kids were always very varied in what they ate until I think 3 to 5 is when parents realize, oh, now my kid's picky and they don't want vegetables anymore. Sierra was always pretty good with vegetables. But my other next two definitely hit like 3 to 5 and didn't want them anymore. And so then the game changes a little bit where you're trying to teach them. You can force them to eat things, but like that's like not a fun thing to do. And it doesn't necessarily teach them, in my mind, like the right way of looking at healthy eating. Like when you're forcing it and saying you have to eat this, it kind of seems like a negative versus like, let's find fruits and vegetables you love and letting them help pick them out at the grocery store, letting them help prepare them. One of the games that we would play when they were really little were I would make a chart with like all the colors of the rainbow and say, couldn't you eat all the colors of the rainbow today? And they thought that was super fun. We would even make like rainbow snacks where you'd make a red, like think of red grapes and add like little clementine oranges and like put all the colors in a rainbow and then we would eat them. So trying to associate healthy eating with positivity and fun. And then as they get even a little bit older, then you start teaching them what's in this. Like, why does it matter? Why do we focus on fruits and vegetables? Why do we have protein? We started talking about vitamins and minerals and how those are in whole foods. And there's different ones in different colors of vegetables and fruits. And it's super cool because those fruits and vegetables are packaged in a way that your body can use them. So as much as we can take a multivitamin, like when you have an avocado, it has the vitamins and minerals that are fat soluble and it has fat in it. It's packaged perfectly. When you have water soluble vitamins in like an apple, there's a lot of water in that apple. It's packaged in a way that you can use it. And so my kids thought it was cool to like start to learn like, oh, like carrots like have this vitamin and it's good for my eyes. Like that's cool. And so I think those are some of the things we did when they were kind of like middle age to try to encourage healthy eating.
Yeah, that's great.
What's so important, you kind of highlighted this, and I think it's important for someone to consider is the reason why it was easier for you to transfer is because you already had it yourself.
Yes.
Right? It's really challenging to transfer something to someone that you do not have.
Sure.
And so if you aren't healthy as a parent individually, or you don't understand why you're eating certain foods. So we were talking about intermittent fasting last night. A lot of people think that intermittent fasting is just a helpful tool for losing weight. It's like, oh, well, I have to intermittent fast to lose weight because they don't understand the physiology or the laws of thermodynamics and energy expenditure. So they don't have that understanding of how their body functions. So therefore they think that one modality of dieting is the only way for them.
Right.
And it's kind of similar when you don't have an understanding of nutrition or movement or training. It's hard to be an example for your children. So a lot of what you had was this stepping stones that you'd already built on that allowed you to transfer that. And I think it's so important too because it's not shaming anyone if they don't have it, but it's encouraging them to see if you can learn this, or at least the 20% that makes 80% of the difference, then you can actually start to transfer that to your kids. Or you can understand like, hey, we don't have healthy foods in the house today. I'm going to start working on me getting healthier, and I'm going to bring my kids into it because it's your responsibility to set them up to be productive adults.
Yes.
And if you want your kids to be healthy adults, you have to make them healthy children. But I'm not a parent, so I could be completely wrong with that. What
No, I agree. I think teaching intuitive eating is difficult when you're eating a lot of processed foods. because it kind of throws off the natural responses that we would have to foods. They feel maybe more less satisfying than they should. And so one of the reasons, both with my adult clients and my children, I focus on fruits and vegetables is if we're getting a good amount of those in a day, we're going to feel more satiated. Same thing with protein. My kids know what foods have protein in them, and we definitely focus on having a little bit of protein. Kids don't need massive amounts of protein, but like they do need some for growing as well. So they know what foods have protein in them, and so we can focus on our plate. And with that, I want to say too, like it bothers me a lot when parents tell kids they have to finish their plate, because I work with adults that still have that and they're 60, 70 years old. And I'm telling them for the first time, you don't have to clear your plate. If you're full, you can stop, because that's an important thing to be able to do. But what I will tell my kids is you don't have to eat everything on your plate, but I would like you to eat one of the pieces of chicken and some of the vegetables. And then whatever else you want is fine. So like help them prioritize like what goes first, because a couple of my kids will definitely eat all the rice, a roll, ask for another roll, and leave the veggies and the chicken if left to their own devices.
Yeah, well, if you don't, I imagine that as an adult you experience this too, but if you don't understand how to prioritize things, you're going to grab the first thing that you imagine is either the most satisfying, the most important, or maybe the most rewarding.
Sure.
And if you aren't told, actually, here's the big stone, for example, here's the big thing you have to focus on first. Let all the other things happen as they must. If you don't get to this, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you aren't taught that order, then you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear you, as simple as that is, being able to transfer it and then them see, like, oh yeah, I feel really good, is enough for them to like get it.
Yes.
Right? You don't have to over-explain it or overdo it. I think somebody could easily hear this and think, well, I don't know all the vitamins and minerals and all the micronutrients. And it's like, yes, you've had that experience. You've studied it. You are educated in it. But even just learning the basics, like you said, Brian, the 20% of nutrition health, what is protein for? What are carbs for? What are fats for? What foods have those is even a really good place to start.
Sure.
To be able to confidently transfer it in a positive way.
Yeah. And I think it's a great example to set to your kids to say, hey, I'm learning this and I'm learning it for the first time. Would you learn it with me? Because then not only you're teaching your kids and learning together, let's look up vitamin A and let's see what it does and let's see what food it's in. Because that's kind of interesting. Like, but even the other lesson that I love that comes from that is you're teaching your kids, if you don't know something, you can learn it, because that's a huge tool. You won't teach them everything and you're going to miss the ball on some things. Yeah. But if they know how to learn and they love to learn, like they can fix anything you missed.
Well, you got to think too, a lot of people have learned how to diet from their parents.
Sure.
That's true.
A lot of people have learned how to have a negative association of food with their parents.
Yeah.
And so the fear that, well, I don't want to bring my kids into this is completely, I think, false, because you're already bringing them into it.
Yes.
And a lot of adults, we talked to all these adults who their moms tried the cayenne pepper lemonade diet. Is that was me. The one that you heard? Uh-huh. Or we did the cantaloupe and cottage cheese. I think that was one you had brought up earlier. Yep. So it's like, well, you're learning it anyways. The kids are learning it anyways.
Yeah.
So why not invite them into the process of doing it together? And sure. I think that's a really great little point, because it doesn't necessarily, it's not obvious that you're going to be teaching them directly, but you are teaching them indirectly.
Yes.
By doing whatever you're doing inside the household. Mm-hmm. So by including them, it almost becomes a family experiment.
Yeah, and I think that this is also a really good balancing conversation around what is the amount of time you should spend being a role model versus actually teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I would be curious to hear your thoughts on maybe misconceptions around how to transfer some of these things, because of course, a lot of parents, once they start doing it, I see a lot of assumptions around, once I start doing it, they're just going to want it. And then I also see a lot of examples of people who say, I'm learning all this. Wow, it's so important. And then just saying, it's important, just telling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that creates a lot of frustration for people when they don't get the response that they want. from your perspective, what are some of the misconceptions around how to transfer this information or how to like give your kids these things, maybe from personal experience or just from things that you've seen in your clients or others?
Yeah. So one, I would say that I think it's funny when people think that your kids will do exactly what you do. Because, like, if that was true, my kids would like clean the kitchen every day and they would do their own laundry happily and they would, yeah, go to the gym and work out and do all these things that I do. And they don't, like, pick up their shoes. But that doesn't mean modeling doesn't work. It just is a long game. It's not instantaneous. And so there are some things that you'll do that they'll model. Typically, it's the things you don't want them to model. Those are the things that they pick up real quick, the bad habits. But the good habits aren't necessarily instantaneous. And that can be frustrating because everybody loves instant results. So sometimes you just have to remember, I'm playing the long game. And then another thing that I think is super important is if they're not seeing you enjoy the way you're eating, enjoy your workouts, if you're talking about them negatively, I'm so miserable, I'm so hungry, I'm so tired, I hate going to the gym, they're very much probably not going to want to do those things. That said, I super enjoy the way I work out and the way I eat, and my kids don't want to do it. So I'm not saying that saying you enjoy it is just going to make them do exactly what you do, but helping them find what they enjoy has been really important. So most of my kids don't like coming to the gym with me. They'll do it sometimes, they'll do it for a little bit, but it's the way I work out is hard. And a lot of adults don't like the way I work out either. It's fun for me and it's not fun for them. But my oldest dances and she loves dance, and has thrived with dance. And that's like good body movement. She has incredible flexibility and mobility beyond anyone in our family. Incredible balance. I do hope eventually that she'll get into weight training because I think that's really important for girls, but it hasn't really clicked as important for her. And I haven't forced her to do that. And I'm probably not going to force my kids to do any kind of specific exercise. But I do try to encourage them. My son loves high risk things. He loves falling. He loves rock climbing and jumping off the top of a bouldering climb. He likes jumping on a trampoline or going to the trampoline park. He just likes a lot of impact and a lot of adrenaline, I think. He actually he did a DECA competition with me, like a kid's DECA competition, which I was so excited. And when it was done, he said he hated it and that he would never do it again. And just about a year later, so just a couple of weeks ago, he mentioned, hey, could I do that again? And I was so excited because there's a part of me that thought I've ruined it. Like it was too miserable. It was too hard too early. It just took some time and he thought about it and he said he wanted to do it.
That's awesome.
He thrives on competition. And so I can get him to work out in the gym with me if I make it a game. If I say, hey, if you beat me in this workout, I'll do the dishes and you don't have to. That kid will work so hard and usually beat me. Even if I set him up for failure, he'll figure it out and figure out a way to win to not do the dishes.
That's funny.
One of the things that you could compare it to is if you're sitting around the house and you're complaining about going to work.
Sure.
Your kids are going to have a negative association to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, well, work is a drag, or all my bosses are evil, or whatever that association is. So it's just being able to understand that at a conscious or unconscious level, they're picking up on those cues and those signals. It also makes sense why kids pick up on your bad habits, because bad habits are easier than good habits.
Right.
So it's a lot easier to see that, oh, well, they pick up on those because I can't even change them.
Right. Well, and it's easier to leave my shoes on the floor than it is to put them away. It's an extra step.
Exactly. That's a prime example.
Yeah. And one other thing that you said that I think is amazing, and also maybe it sounds challenging, but maybe it's not as challenging as I assume it is really being in tune with your child and figuring out what makes them tick. Like, instead of assuming, oh, what works for me is going to work for them, or, oh, I'm learning this, so they're going to love learning it too, making whatever those default assumptions are about them. You saw that Sierra had to find the thing that she loved and then be given that opportunity.
Yeah.
Henry needed a little bit more structuring of, okay, how can I create competition? Because you are competitive, even though you say you're not, but you're like, you're not as competitive as maybe certain athletes.
Sure.
Whereas he needs that structure and frame of like, beat me.
Mm-hmm.
And then he loves it.
Yes.
Right. So it's like you were really intentional, it sounds like, to find what makes them tick and then try to fit in healthy ways for them to access that.
Yeah. And let me add, like, so Zoe, my 9-year-old, has juvenile osteoporosis. So she's broken 8 bones in 9 years.
Crazy.
And so that has been a different hurdle because the game with her is totally different. She does need to strength train and she doesn't want to. But for her bone density, it's one of the few things that we can do to really improve it. Activity wise, she's limited because she is a fall risk. And so swimming has been a huge thing for her. Swimming is like the one place where it's like you could bubble wrap her in the pool and nothing can happen. And even when she has a break, she's still sometimes allowed to swim.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can keep her active. So yeah, I do think it's super important to realize every child is different and they're different at every age. They need different things at different ages because little kids need like unstructured play. Well, I think one of the hard things for parents is realizing they need to be outside and off technology because kids are very easy when you put them on technology. They turn into zombies and you can have peace and quiet. You can get whatever you want done. So it's a little easy to slip into that without realizing you've done it and realizing that you're teaching your kids to just be zoned out on technology, maybe eating snacks while they're doing it.
Yeah.
Really bad habits for life. Yeah. So being intentional about taking technology away, turning off the TV and throwing them outside, letting them be wild, be loud out there, have opportunities to climb, to play, to jump, explore safely, but also take some risks sometimes. My son needs risks to feel alive. Less risks for Zoe because we've realized that's just not worth it for her right now, but it should be getting better as she gets older. And then realizing too, so my oldest, she was in dance and then we ended up taking a break from competitive dance because it got really intense. And then COVID happened. And during that time, she was, turning like 13 and just started getting depressed. She didn't have a lot of activity. We're like locked down in our house. Everyone's starting to struggle with like eating a little too much and whatnot. And she started really feeling depressed and like kind of went down a really dark path for a while. And so when we were talking to professionals, like helping her get out of it, one of the things they were telling her is you need to exercise. And it was just weird to me because I'm like, clearly that is the answer. I know that, but like, how do I encourage her or make her help her do that? And so we would talk about it. And she said she didn't want to come to the gym with me, but she said that she would dance in her room. That's kind of where it started. She got back to dancing in her room for maybe 20, 30 minutes a day. And she'd get kind of sweaty and she did feel better, which then turned into she wanted to start competing in dance again. So she came to us and said, I think I want to try out for dance company again. Is that okay? And it's like she had hit a point in her life where she knew she needed that and it was her choice. And it was really beautiful to see her take time to work on specific moves she needed to be able to do, work on her flexibility on her own, like really take initiative in getting what she needed and what she wanted during that time. And I feel like that was like a very exciting time. And it's not like I made that time. It's not like I told her, this is when it's going to happen. Like it's kind of how her life unfolded with things that we didn't foresee. We didn't know COVID was going to happen. We didn't know how hard it would be transferring to a new school, like all the things that were happening during that time. So with each kid, your journey was your journey. You started your awareness because of whatever reasons you did. Like you've just got to be watching them and ready for when it happens, like when it turns on, when they suddenly are like, I actually want to be really good at this sport, and then like champion that and then help them pivot when they're ready to pivot, help them stay committed when they should stay committed, let them back off when you realize, okay, this is too much and we need to back off.
What do you think your responsibility is as a parent? Like when you think of all the things you're doing, like one of the things that illuminates for me is that you're able to be so involved because you are so healthy. I think that if you think of like the output that you're describing, it's a lot of output into your children.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously there's a piece that I want to touch upon, which is how you actually prioritize yourself now, because we've kind of gone through the gamut, but we'll come back to that. But from a mindset or belief, What do you think your role is as a parent? Like, what is the innate, like, this is like the belief, or this is the thing that I believe I have to do for my kids, or
Yeah.
because that's a big driving force. It's very obvious that you're very passionate
Core
about.
belief, the
Yeah.
paradigm.
So I, from the get-go, wanted to raise healthy children that had the least amount of trauma possible. Like I wanted to not traumatize my kids. Like that was kind of important to me, so that they didn't have really big things they had to deal with in that realm. But aside from that, I just wanted them to be functional, healthy, loving, responsible adults one day that felt capable of doing whatever it is God designed them to do. And so I just didn't want to hold them back in any way, and wanted to be basically, I feel like as a parent, you get to help facilitate the growth of a human being that has crazy potential, because I believe everyone has crazy potential, but like those are your people that you get to raise up. And I think that's really cool.
That's awesome.
And nobody does it perfectly. And nobody ends up on the other side without probably some mistakes made. I think it's important as a parent to be ready to say, I'm sorry, I messed up in that area. But that said, yeah, I think that's always been my goal, is to raise functional, healthy, loving kids that like can handle life.
It's such a gift to be so engaged. It's another great reminder too, at least what I hear when I think of your story, what I will experience in the future, and then the clients that we work with, especially mothers. I'm sure fathers are similar in their experience, but of course varied. When you take care of yourself, that is a gift you give your children, because you have more bandwidth to be engaged at the level where you can pick up on these things or transfer those principles or maintain your original intention. Because you can set an intention before you have kids, and then resources are limited, time and energy is low, and you completely forget your original intention, or you're like, oh my gosh, I can't even do this. So I think that's a really beautiful depiction of what it means to really be a parent from your eyes. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
Now, one thing I want to do to kind of tie this conversation in is look at where people can start. If maybe they did have that original intention, or they're like, yeah, that would be wonderful. I would love to show my kids how to be healthy. I want to be healthy. What are some really simple rules or principles that you've seen work really well in your household that maybe people could start with or even build upon to become healthier as a family?
Yeah. Okay. So the number one thing that I'll say is sleep. Because if mom and dad aren't sleeping, I mean, I don't function at all without sleep. And my kids function very poorly without sleep too. People are not meant to not sleep. And so getting sleeping in order, whatever that looks like in your household, that's always been a huge priority to me from like the moment I had kids. I'm like, I'm not going to have a lot of kids if I'm not sleeping, because I can't do that. And so that has to be a high priority, because that affects your ability to like intuitively eat. You can't intuitively eat when you're in lack of sleep. All your signals get off. It also affects your ability to exercise and recover well. It affects your activity level and how active you want to be. And so number one is sleep. But after that, I think an important thing nutrition wise is having whole foods, fruits and vegetables accessible in your house, and having mostly good choices. Because I don't think you should necessarily be a drill sergeant of your children's food. I think it's important that they get to have choice, but if all the choices are good choices, then it becomes a lot easier. Yeah. If you put out fruit roll-ups and apples, they're going to pick the fruit roll-ups because that's more fun. But if I put out apples and oranges and grapes, all my kids have preferences there. They're all finding something that they like, but they're all good choices. One thing that I've learned as my kids have gotten older is I used to be able to keep more junk food in the house and regulate it easier, put it higher on the shelf so they couldn't reach it, because I do like to have junk food. And I'm actually really good at, if there's a bowl of M&Ms sitting on the table, I'll have a few and I'm good. And I can walk by it all day and not have more. But my kids hit a point where they could reach that, and that wasn't the case. They did not know how to do that. It was much harder to have self-control in that way. So we started eliminating some of the things that they didn't have self-control with, and getting individual size packaged things that at least gave some awareness. So instead of having a gallon of ice cream, we get those little Bluebell cups that are a half cup, which are very depressing when you realize that's a half cup of ice cream. That's a serving. They're very small. But it just created awareness of, okay, if you're going to have a dessert every day, it needs to be a serving, a small thing. And then we do have rules with that, whether we get the mini cones or the mini cups, you can have one a day. And sure, sometimes like we'll realize they're gone too fast. And then like the thing that's sad is we can't buy more.
Can't get more.
We can't get more until like 2 weeks from now. So whoever screwed that up is going to hear from it from all the other kids. We have peanut butter in the house. We started buying Nutella and realized we can't have Nutella in the house because my kids will grab that thing in a spoon and eat the whole jar, which they won't do with peanut butter. So it's amazing how sugary things, they ruin your ability to self-regulate, and it's really difficult for children to self-regulate.
Makes sense.
It's a drug that feels good while you're doing it. So yeah, I would say a huge thing with nutrition is keep mostly healthy choices in the house so that every choice they make is a good choice. One day they hit the age where they can drive or they're at school and they can buy things. So you start to lose control over time anyway. Like you're not going to exactly know what your kids are doing and what they're eating. So the more that you can set up those principles early, I think it's important. The other thing I'll say is when I talk to my kids about food, we talk a lot about how it feels, because I think that's a huge part of intuitive eating is you have to understand how food feels, not just while you're eating it, but later. So how was I feeling when I started eating that? How was I feeling while I was eating it? And how did I feel afterwards? And so I talk a lot about the choices I make with food. I can feel very similarly if I'm feeling like I need something sweet and I eat a handful of M&Ms. I feel similar to if I eat a handful of baby carrots. Now I know the baby carrots are a better choice for nutrition. And when I talk about like how I feel later, the baby carrots make me feel better later. So I have more extended energy. I tend to have an easier time not going back for more and more. Whereas the M&Ms, like suddenly I feel like I'm going back for more and more. Like I'm getting, I have less ability to self-regulate. So I'll talk to my kids about things like that. Do they do it perfectly? No. But then they start to see like, it's not just that I can't have M&Ms. Like I feel better if I choose this later. And so hopefully one day, I'm hoping that translates. I feel like my 15-year-old, I see her making some of those choices sometimes, but like I said, we're playing the long game. Yeah. And one of the things that's really hard about parenting is that like, you don't really know how you did until it's over. So I think it's going.
Yeah. What about on the exercise side? Is it just technology time is minimal or intentional? How does that work?
Yes. I think one of the things that I loved as a kid was taking family walks. And so we try to prioritize family walks with the dog. And sometimes those are non-negotiable. The kids will be like, I just want to stay home. And I say, no, we're taking this walk as a family. I take them to places like Urban Air or the trampoline park so that they can jump and move. I try to take them swimming a lot in the summer. We have friends that have trampolines and playgrounds. And so I feel like a lot of times setting up play dates with friends where they can be active is really important. And it's very interesting. Even I think about Zoe with her osteoporosis. And so she has a lot of pain with movement. But when she's playing with friends, she moves a lot better because she's having fun and she doesn't notice the pain as much. And so there is something about like when you find what they enjoy, you just don't, it's easier to do it because you're having fun and enjoying it.
Well, that's a really great point because so this weekend Lindsay had her birthday.
Yes.
And we had an adult field day.
Yes.
And so we did 10 events, we did egg toss, 3-legged race, and Lindsay's mom's 64, and my grandmother's 77. And they were doing the tug of war.
Yep.
And they were doing the 3-legged race.
Yep.
And even your dad, who's 65.
65.
He still played the games and had fun. And so that's the opposite, obviously, but they wouldn't have done those things by themselves.
Right.
They wouldn't have had fun doing them by themselves. They wouldn't have been engaged. And so there's something to be said about just being able to create a community. Like when you're around other people, you're engaged in something. That is actually what fun is.
Yes.
Fun does not happen on your phone. phone
Very
is
true.
pacifier, right? It's a pacifier for a lot of our emotions. So
Yes.
just even someone else who hears that, it's like, oh, there's a lot to this. Being able to pull people in makes the world a difference.
Yeah, and something I'll say is like I noticed my kids, especially young, didn't like structured sports. I remember the first dance class I ever took Sierra to was a ballet class, and they had them stand in a line and wait, and you had to stay in that line. And then when it was your turn, you got to do three sachets. I mean, I say it, three little thingies across the floor, and then you got back in line. And when she was in line, she would turn to the mirror and she would do all these little dance things, and the teachers would come correct her and tell her to just stand. And quickly, I was like, absolutely, we're never coming here again. They are teaching her to hate dance and hate moving, where like all she wants to do is move and dance. And so the dance studio we found, I talked to them about my fears. They were completely different. Like they were all about making sure these girls, even competitively, loved dance and loved what they were doing. And I was like, okay,
Bingo.
we'll do this one.
Yeah.
I would never put her in any other dance studio than the one we're in because of their mindset. And then even like, you know, putting them in soccer, this and that, like that isn't the only way to get them active for sure. And I would just be very cautious that it stays fun for a really long time if you want it to be something that they will be able to adopt as a lifestyle. I mean, I think a lot of parents think more like, I need my kid to be a professional, whatever. I need them to play in high school. I need them to play in college. They need to put in the time now. Some kids like that. Most kids don't. They just want to be able to play and have fun.
Makes sense.
And that's super normal and natural. And my personality is like a play and have fun. So that works really well for me. But I think some parents who are a little more driven by excellence and driven by success struggle to let their kids just have fun.
For all around here, as far as finding ways to get kids healthy, what would you say to someone who is struggling to make themselves healthy and struggling to transfer that to their kids? They're like, oh, you know, this is really great, but I haven't even done it for myself. What encouragement would you give to that person?
Yeah, you are teaching your kids no matter what. So they are learning from you what it looks like to be an adult when it comes to food and exercise. So you are either setting them up for success or you're setting them up for struggle. And your kids they're resilient and they can grow and figure out and do the hard work of fixing the damage you did. But like, I feel like most parents aren't looking to create that kind of situation for their kids because that's hard. And yeah, I just think that for one, you know, I had my 3-year-old now when I was 38. So I will not be super young when she's in college. I'll be, maybe it's young, 56 when she's like 18. And in my 60s, when she's having grandkids, like I want to be functional. Like I want to be moving. I want to be involved I want to be the kind of grandparent my kids have. My parents are incredibly involved. They can still in their 70s pick up the kids and hold them and carry them and walk, which I think is really cool. Like I want to be able to do those things. So I think longevity wise for the parent, like it's super important to also not put the burden on your kids to care for you very young because you didn't take care of yourself. But then also, yeah, it's just like, what a gift to be able to give your kids the skills that they need to like not have to struggle in that realm. Because a lot of life is hard and like a lot of struggles are unexpected and unavoidable. And I'm a big fan of like what you can learn and what you can avoid. Probably should.
Yeah, and it's really what I hear is find a greater reason to get through the struggle of you getting healthy. Right? See it, zoom out, be able to see all of the different benefits or the possibility of what's going to happen when, rather than being so stuck in this present month or even year that it takes to get healthy. Like,
I think that's huge. I think people think they need quick results. And when you think of the lifespan of your entire life, taking a year or two to work on your health is really a small amount of time.
It is.
And it's a reasonable amount of time to make a lot of progress.
Especially if you think that's going to set me up for the rest of my life.
Decades and decades
Of better health and being able to stay engaged. So if you can't zoom out, then maybe that's the encouragement is like even 2 years It's not 2 years so you can fit in the size pants you want. That'll be a great benefit. But 2 years of your whole life, 2 years of your kids' whole life that they're with you, they're going to watch you get healthy and be impressed by you, proud of you, whatever your motivators are, right? It's being able to find that reason to do it and take care of yourself no matter how much.
And I think when you nail what feels good and finding the things that will like bring you more energy with life and more clarity and more zest and like more mental health, you realize it's so much more than like getting to a healthy weight.
Yeah.
You give yourself such a gift when you improve the way you feel and how you show up every day.
Yeah, 100%. Good stuff. Well, this has been a pleasure. And thank you for sharing all your thoughts. Alfie appreciates it too. Yes. Our dog has popped into the frame for a moment. He knows it's almost his time to be active and healthy. So with that said, we hope that this has been very helpful for you listening. We hope that you were able to take some golden nuggets back to your family, especially if you are the person who is leading the charge with health, which a lot of times it does have to be one parent, at least at first, when it's not a shared family value. But you have so much influence, and I think that's the encouragement that we all would give you if you're the one listening to this podcast, is take some nuggets, make some tweaks, make some adjustments, and use that to go out and conquer your day.
And have fun with it.
Yeah. I would say a tie down too, as we're building off that piece, is there's a really great quote from Ed Milet that says, be the one who changed everything for your family. And you can do that with your wealth. You can do that with your business. You can do that with all your success. But if you change your family tree with your health, it's going to have more of an impact long-term than anything else. So
definitely.
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yes, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. So if you love this video, give it a thumbs up. Give us some comments in the comment section. Let us know what resonated with you, what you took away. For an Apple, feel free to screenshot this, shout us out on Instagram so we can connect with you and see how this is resonating. And as Lindsay already said, go out and conquer your day.
Cheers.
Cheers.